He promised Jenny forever, but behind the curtain, there might be another wife, one the world was never supposed to see. Multiple sources say Sumit isn't just keeping secrets. He's allegedly tied himself legally, emotionally, and possibly financially to another woman while still smiling for the cameras with Jenny. If even a fraction of this is true, then everything we thought we knew about their story, the sacrifices, the marriage, the drama, it all burns down. Not quietly, loudly, and possibly for good. Welcome to Sister Wives Daily. I'm Sarah. If you've ever rooted for love to win, even when the odds were crazy and the families said no, you need to hear this. Hit subscribe and drop your thoughts in the comments, because trust me, nobody's walking away from this one feeling comfortable. So here's the situation. For years, viewers watched Jenny leave everything behind to be with Sumit, her home, her country, her grandchildren, her sense of security. But now there are new claims backed by insider whispers that Sumit has allegedly married someone else in secret. Not before Jenny, not 20 years ago, while Jenny was living in his house, while the reality show cameras were rolling. It sounds insane, but the sources aren't random message board trolls. These are people who have been right in the past. Former insiders, family-adjacent teepsters, and one social media leak that exploded for a reason. It lined up too cleanly with things we've all seen, but maybe didn't connect, until now. This is not about some side fling or emotional cheating. We're talking about a full-blown, allegedly legal second marriage that was hidden carefully. While Jenny was learning how to adapt to life in India, navigating complicated in-law dynamics and cultural expectations, Sumit may have been preparing something else. Something off-camera, something with permanence. And fans are already asking the worst question. How much of their love story was for real, and how much was performance? Because if Jenny was legally married to Sumit, and she didn't even know he had another wife, then what is she living in? A marriage, or a lie? There's now speculation that this second relationship wasn't spontaneous either. That it may have been brewing while Jenny was slowly fighting for a place in his world. While she was being told she wasn't good enough for his family, too old for approval, too different to belong. Was all that pressure distracting her from seeing a bigger betrayal? And let's be honest, this wouldn't be the first time Sumit kept critical information from Jenny. Remember when he accidentally forgot to tell her he was already married to someone else? The woman waited years for the divorce. We all watched it. It was painful, drawn out, and came with constant promises that there'd be no more lies. Now imagine what it means if, allegedly, he did it again. For years, the couple framed their battles as love versus tradition. Jenny and Sumit against the world. But what if that was never the real fight? What if the real enemy wasn't society, it was the secret across the hallway? There's now chatter about sudden disappearances from Jenny's social media. Clips fans went back to that now feel off. And moments where Sumit shifted gears right after the wedding. Some fans even point to a specific gap in filming schedules and say, that's when he made the move. No accusations have been confirmed officially, but the clues are lining up in a way that's hard to ignore, especially because Jenny hasn't directly denied the claims. And Sumit, he's making carefully worded appearances, full of smiles but no clear statements. Nothing about this is entertaining. It's gut-wrenching. Because we're not talking about some influencer PR stunt. We're talking about a woman, now in her 60s, who gambled everything for love, and who might now be finding out that love was never fully hers to begin with. There's still one question nobody can shake off. If Sumit really went this far to keep a second life secret, then how long was he planning it? Did he fall apart under pressure, or has he been playing a deeper game this whole time? When Jenny first walked onto our screens, she wasn't just chasing love, she was chasing the last real shot at a future she believed in. A long-distance relationship that started with a catfish and somehow transformed into one of the most talked-about storylines in 90-Day Fiancé history. Jenny, in her 60s, emotionally raw but hopeful, believing in Sumit like her whole world depended on him. And in a way, it did. Their relationship was controversial from the jump. Not just the age difference, which people obsessed over, but the situation. Jenny had given up stability, her job, her family in the US, to fly across the world and live with a man who hadn't even told his parents she was arriving. Remember that? She showed up, and Sumit was still telling his family that she was a Facebook friend visiting. But Jenny loved him, trusted him. She bought into the fairy tale when everything else screamed fair warning. What most viewers forget is how long this relationship dragged in limbo. Jenny first visited India in 2013. For 10 whole years, it was delay after resistance after excuse after heartbreak, always for one reason or another. At first, Sumit's family said no. Then it turned out he was already married. And what did Jenny do? She didn't run, she stayed. She waited for the divorce. She kept showing up. At one point, she even returned to the US after being denied an extension on her visa, just to come back again because Sumit promised things would change. It became a cycle. She sacrificed her freedom, her money, her support system, all for the man everyone told her wasn't ready. The red flags were always there. Small things, easily dismissed back then. Like how Sumit avoided giving Jenny legal rights to anything, no property, no shared assets, no formal immigration plan that protected her. She wasn't on paperwork. She was barely acknowledged publicly by his parents in the first few years. Even after their marriage, the vibe was off. He still seemed nervous around them, unsure whether to stand by her or please everyone else. He took months, even years, to do what most couples manage within weeks, mutual commitment with clear stakes. And still, Jenny kept choosing him. This wasn't a quick TV romance. This was a slow surrender. She sold her California home, cashed out retirement savings, left her daughters and grandchildren behind. Her visa only ever allowed short stays unless Sumit married her. She had no health care in India, no safety net if things fell apart. She was stepping further and further out over the ledge, and Sumit always held the rope. For fans, watching Jenny's journey felt personal. People rooted for her because you could feel the hope in her. You could see how badly she wanted it to work, how much she believed he was worth every insult, every delay, every humiliation she had to survive just to be by his side. And the show leaned into that too, casting them as the star-crossed couple fighting cultural norms. But let's sit with that. Fighting cultural norms sounds noble. Fighting reality is something different. Because when one person has the power in every part of the relationship, social, financial, legal, and emotional, it stops being romance and starts being control. Sumit's entire life was in India. His family name, his business, his legal citizenship, his social circle. Jenny had none of that. No work visa, no permanent residency. Her entire identity in India became his wife, but only when it was convenient. She wasn't treated like family. She wasn't given a seat at the table. She was tolerated at best and hidden at worst, especially in the early years. And here's the part that hurts more in hindsight. Even when Jenny started expressing more anger, more disillusionment on camera in later seasons, there were always breadcrumbs of self-doubt in her tone. Maybe they're right, she'd say about the people calling her foolish. Maybe I'm just too old for this. And Sumit would reassure her, calm her down, tell her to be patient. Meanwhile, nothing concrete ever changed. The moment Jenny sold her house and moved across the world might have been the setup to the biggest betrayal yet. Because as fans rewatch old episodes now, a different pattern takes shape. The moments that felt like annoying detours, Sumit delaying again, asking for more time, refusing to legally commit unless it was on his terms, those weren't just cultural clashes. They were power moves. Small resets that kept Jenny uncertain, dependent, waiting. All the eggs in one basket and Sumit holding the basket. And people talked. Maybe not loud enough to hear over the TLC soundtrack, but the whispers were there. Rumors that Sumit was seen out with other women. That he had connections his family didn't hate. That Jenny was being used to stay on the show while something else, something real, was happening away from the production schedule. She would brush that off, and honestly, people let it go. But why? Looking back, we have to ask, were those rumors too ridiculous to believe or too dangerous to admit? Jenny always seemed one step out of sync with what was happening around her. Like she thought she was on one path, while everyone else saw another. She'd make big declarations in confessionals, saying things were improving, just weeks after we'd watched Sumit make it painfully clear he still didn't have her back in a full, public, non-negotiable way. There was always a mismatch, and at some point, it stopped feeling like love and started looking like performance. Something you keep up long enough to keep the camera rolling, or to buy more time. And time is what Jenny gave. 10 years of it in a country that never claimed her, for a man who allegedly might have been saving his real loyalty for someone else. She's now in her mid-60s, without a career, without a green card, and possibly, depending on what's proven, without a legal marriage that protects her. And the worst part, if what people are saying is even partially true, then this didn't just happen recently. It's been in motion, behind smiles, behind silence, behind the scenes? What if Jenny ignored the red flags, not because she didn't see them, but because acknowledging them would have meant facing a truth so devastating she couldn't survive it? What if those cultural misunderstandings were really escape routes, ready-made explanations for Sumit to use when things got uncomfortable? What if none of this was misunderstanding, and all of it was misdirection? Whispers can be ignored until they suddenly start sounding like patterns. That's the thing with secrets, they don't always scream. Sometimes they sit quietly in plain sight, waiting for enough people to start connecting the dots. And right now, the dots around Sumit are forming a shape Jenny never saw coming. A second marriage. Not theoretical, not historical. One that people are now saying may have happened behind closed doors while she was still trying to prove to his family she belonged. The chatter started in small circles, online forums where dedicated fans dissected Jenny and Sumit's every move. At first, it sounded like noise. Sumit's seeing someone else. He's married again. Most ignored it, thinking it was probably trolls trying to stir up drama. Until someone dropped details. Specific ones. A user claiming to have known someone close to Sumit's extended family shared that there'd been a quiet wedding. Not in a huge ceremony. Not one that made it to Instagram. But enough people knew, and they were told to keep it private. Then came a local report from an Indian gossip site, not one of those random clickbait generators, but a smaller verified platform known for breaking regional TV stories. It didn't drop names, but described a well-known reality figure who had recently and privately remarried someone selected through family channels. Jenny wasn't mentioned, but the timeline they described matched up chillingly well with a stretch of time Sumit went mostly silent on social media. Right after his televised wedding to Jenny aired. Something changed after the wedding, but what if the real problem was that it wasn't his only wedding? Suddenly, the timeline starts bending in strange ways. Profiles that used to post cute photos daily slowed to a trickle. Pictures of Jenny and Sumit together became rare. Comments started getting limited or turned off. Fans assumed they were keeping things private after their marriage finally became legal. But now, people are wondering, was it privacy or misdirection? Several eagle-eyed followers also noted changes in Jenny's online tone. She seemed upbeat in videos, but emotionally distant in posts. Like she was showing up because she had to, not because she wanted to. Her usual postings of traditional Indian dishes she once celebrated learning to cook appeared less. Instead, vague one-liners about loyalty and learning who's really there for you slipped into captions. Alone, they're not confirmation. But against the backdrop of these rumors, they don't read casual anymore. Let's talk about logistics. In India, marriage registration is a legal process. Records exist, but they aren't always publicly searchable the way they are in some other countries, especially without exact names, locations, or case numbers. That legal obscurity opens a gray area. If someone wanted to keep a marriage secret and they had cooperation from family or community, it's not impossible, particularly if the marriage happened outside camera zones and wasn't registered in the same jurisdiction where Jenny and Sumit live most days. Now think about motive. A second marriage, if it exists, could possibly be less about love and more about restoring stature. From the beginning, Sumit's family made it clear they didn't approve of Jenny. Huge age gap, foreign woman, no room for children. None of it fit their idea of a real wife. Is it wild to wonder if Sumit, under long-standing pressure, eventually chose to half comply? Publicly stand by Jenny, but privately appease family expectations through someone else. Someone appropriate in their eyes, someone younger, culturally aligned. Maybe even someone who'd keep quiet. It started as whispers in the control room. Quiet glances. Nervous jokes nobody laughed at. When the same name keeps showing up in incident reports, when the call sheet gets rearranged weekly to work around one person's moods, tantrums, and disappearances, something shifts. And the shift wasn't subtle anymore. Producers didn't panic right away. They don't. Reality TV thrives on energy, unpredictability, mess. That's the product. That's the selling point. But when cast management feels more like bomb disposal, when even the seasoned crew starts asking for different assignments just to avoid another outburst, that's not production anymore. That's triage. And with Jasmine, it wasn't about one moment that made everyone question the system. It was the slow, creeping realization that every moment was becoming harder to control. Everything had to be filtered through a Jasmine lens. Was this scene going to set her off? What could they cut later if it did? Could they mic her without triggering an argument? By the time Season X entered mid-filming, sources said producers were holding emergency check-ins just to get through shooting days that involved her. Some had literal backup scripts, alternate shoot plans, and even timed lunch breaks just to create buffer room if she came in ready to throw off pacing or delay hours. According to one allegedly frustrated assistant director, she didn't sabotage the scenes. She made it so we couldn't do anything until she felt like it. And it gets worse when someone realizes she knew it, not guessed it, knew she was the problem and leaned into that power. That's when systems start breaking. Not because one person's dramatic, but because they understand how to weaponize the rules that are supposed to protect everyone. The biggest red flag: scene reworks. Producers were taking entire shoot days and throwing out footage because Jasmine would demand changes, not adjustments, full rewrites, to how her scenes were framed. She allegedly wanted specific lighting, preferred camera angles, and in some cases refused to respond to cast prompts unless she had seen the storyline outline ahead of time. Which was not part of her contract. Reality TV isn't fully scripted, sure, but most cast members don't ask to approve the scenes before filming them. Jasmine allegedly tried. Then, when she didn't get her way, posts started popping up on her Instagram that fans thought were subtle jabs at production, but insiders saw them as warnings. Stuff like, "They always cut the real story," or "People don't know the truth yet." Innocent to a casual viewer. Dangerous if you're on legal duty for a network. Even her likes started getting attention. Jasmine would like a tweet criticizing the show's editing, then unlike it days later. She'd like shady comments about other cast members, then claim she misunderstood the post. Producers knew what was happening. She wasn't breaking NDAs outright. She was bending them in ways legal teams couldn't always touch. And as this pattern kept growing, the top brass started doing damage reports. According to a source close to post-production, they started logging specific infractions: refusal to appear in a scheduled confessional, disputing pre-filmed audio, documenting interactions when she allegedly claimed she wouldn't promote an episode unless her demands were met first. At one point, producers reportedly floated the idea of limiting her screen time until she calmed down. The idea: use edits to pressure her into cooperation. Instead, insiders say Jasmine doubled down. Allegedly, she told a crew member, "They'll come crawling back. Without me, they have no fire." And to be fair, she wasn't entirely wrong. Ratings did drop any time she went quiet. Views flatlined during the slower arcs. The problem wasn't her chaos. It was that the show became addicted to it. And the stronger the addiction, the more dangerous the supply. Staff morale dipped. Not because people disliked her personally. Many still liked some version of Jasmine when she wasn't spiraling. But unpredictability breaks trust, trust breaks structure, and for a production crew, broken structure is a monster. Some days she'd arrive smiling, warm, energized. The next day, not show at all. Other days, she'd come ready for war and nobody knew why. Was it personal, professional, a bad edit, a disagreement with another producer? Nobody had the answer. But the impact was always the same: broken momentum. One coordinator reportedly stopped scheduling her until the morning of, waiting to confirm whether she was emotionally available that day. That's not a shoot schedule. That's a crisis hotline. And this wasn't a 10-person indie doc crew. This was a real, nationally broadcast franchise dropping tens of thousands on shoot days Jasmine was turning into negotiation sessions. Every time a scene got delayed, rescheduled, or killed altogether, the budget bled. Time is money, and Jasmine was costing both. That's when meetings started shifting tone. Regular notes weren't enough. Legal had to get involved, not over one incident, but preparing for what might happen based on pattern. Quiet conversations emerged between department heads about whether she could finish the season, not in terms of story arc, but production safety. If you've ever worked on a team where one person demands all the energy, you already know this grip. It's exhausting. It's disorienting. Eventually, it becomes unsustainable. And that's exactly what was happening behind the scenes. The producers, editors, story people, the same folks who coached Jasmine, shaped her narratives, protected her from real PR blowback, were now begging for distance. Because at some point, the star stops collaborating and starts punishing the people who built them. Jasmine allegedly argued edits in real time while watching the aired episodes, not as critiques, but as accusations, calling out the producers publicly, deeming behind-the-scenes screenshots to fan accounts that suddenly started sharing inside tea with shocking accuracy. And still, no direct NDA violations, just towing the line, over and over. The silence from TLC wasn't complacency. It was containment. They were trying to fight a media forest fire with an eyedropper because every move she made had fan reaction. And every reaction made her look bigger, stronger, more in demand. Cutting her, a PR problem; keeping her, a legal one. She made herself impossible to edit without tipping the scale. One bad cut, she'd retaliate, forget passive aggression, post a throwback, reference old emails, make her massive fan base start asking uncomfortable questions online, questions TLC didn't want to answer, not because they were hiding something scandalous, but because it was easier not having to explain any of it, until it wasn't. Eventually, the line producers allegedly stopped taking questions about her availability altogether. Discussions turned toward feasibility, not cooperation. One director privately admitted it felt like building a set next to a volcano. Helpful when it's quiet, lethal when it starts rumbling. And right at the spike of mid-season tension, she went fully silent online. That's when everyone knew. Someone finally stepped in. Crew members stopped tiptoeing around her. Cast members smiled easier. Timelines got smoother. The fires stopped because the source was removed. But was it a smart call? Or did TLC take a bigger risk by dropping their lead shot caller? Because even now, the story's not done. She left the building, but the shockwave stayed. And one particular co-star? He couldn't walk away from the aftermath. It was never about just being famous. Not for Jasmine. For her, fame was the bait. What she really wanted was control. Not the kind that gets handed to you after years of loyalty. The kind you take, piece by piece, post by post, until the network realizes they're not writing the script anymore. You are, and that's exactly what started happening. Slowly, then in full force. At first, the social media pattern seemed harmless. Normal cast behavior. Post an episode reaction, shout out fans, tease future drama. But Jasmine's content had a different rhythm. Followers started noticing she'd post before episodes aired, not just guessing plot points, but hinting at exact twists. Then came the cryptic teasers, quotes about betrayal, screenshots where text conversation bubbles were cropped just enough to spark imagination. Black screens with music that only made sense after the episode aired. A shot of a suitcase. A text that said, "You don't know the half of it." It wasn't random. It was choreography. Posts designed not to explain, but provoke. And provoke they did. Reddit forums lit up. Instagram fan pages started building entire timelines from her stories alone. Was she moving out? Breaking up? Blaming production? Was Gino lying? Jasmine never said it outright. But she didn't have to. She'd let the audience argue themselves into a frenzy, then wait for someone to guess right and hit like. That like button became her most dangerous weapon, because she could claim innocence. All she did was like a post. But to fans, a like was confirmation, a wink, a nod, a breadcrumb that kept them hunting and hashtagging. Each time drama started dying down, Jasmine would push the gas again, change her profile photo, go live and cry but never name names. Start following random breakup pages. Even post a song, not a caption, just an emotional ballad that said everything without saying anything. And every time she stirred it, engagement shot through the roof. Fans rallied. Conspiracies spread. Production phones rang with frantic, "What is she posting now?" moments. Interns were reportedly tasked with monitoring her every online move, not because they wanted to stop her, but because they had to prepare damage control scripts before leaks turned into stories. At some point, insiders say producers pulled her aside to ask for mutual cooperation with online output. Her response, rumored to have been cold, sharp, and completely unbothered. A message was allegedly relayed. "They don't control my phone." And she was right. Her audience didn't see producers. They saw Jasmine. The fiery, emotional, unpredictable, honest one who kept things real while the others played roles. She had them. Hundreds of thousands across platforms, hanging on her every post. A power TLC didn't fully understand or contain. Because Jasmine was doing something messy and brilliant, she was cutting the middleman. If TLC shaped her image on screen, she reshaped it off screen. Immediately, publicly, without edits. That's where the power shift began. She stopped reacting to the show and started rewriting it in real time. If an edit made her look impulsive, she went online and posted screenshots, proving context. If cast members called her too emotional, she leaked messages from private chats where they were friendlier than their public shade suggested. If the show made Gino look like the patient saint, Jasmine hinted he took advantage of her emotionally when cameras were off. She cast doubts. And doubts don't need facts. They only need enough attention to destabilize trust. The biggest shift came when Jasmine allegedly crossed a line that TLC couldn't ignore anymore. Branded partnerships, unapproved, done through influencer friends. Troll accounts being tagged in deals. Fans suddenly buying products connected to her, but not through official show promos. Revenue that didn't touch the network. That's not just complicated. It's breached territory. That's also when Jasmine reportedly started playing a new hand, using her audience as leverage. Some insiders say she told producers that if her pay wasn't increased or if editing didn't improve, she'd start giving exclusive early scoop to selected fans and YouTubers, not tabloids, fans. And sure enough, around that same time, little-known content creators began dropping eerily accurate tea. Plot twists before episodes aired, dialogues that hadn't hit screen yet, relationship tips so precise they had to come from inside the convo. So production started scrambling, not just for plot control, but narrative survival. You can't run a reality franchise where the cast is leaking the raw footage through emojis and subtweets. Still, some crew members saw it differently. Privately, a few said maybe she wasn't trying to destroy anything. Maybe she was tired of getting sliced up into tropes, of watching her vulnerability get mined for shock value. Because yes, Jasmine was drama, but she was also unfeigned. When she cried, it didn't feel elegant or staged. She sobbed with busted eyelashes and mascara-streaked cheeks, not flawless confessionals and clean tissues. There was a brutal honesty to her pain that the audience responded to, even if the show didn't always protect that. Maybe, just maybe, she cracked because she stopped trusting that anyone else would. And that's an uncomfortable truth. Because while Jasmine may have blurred so many lines she triggered corporate alarm bells, some would argue that she was reacting to exploitation, not orchestrating one. When your real life becomes entertainment, when your relationship becomes property, when your breakdown is sold as a teaser, isn't fighting back the only survival move? But that empathy doesn't neutralize risk. Jasmine may have started as a product of the system, but she evolved into a rival for the system itself. By the time pay negotiations came around for the next season's reunion, sources say Jasmine arrived with numbers. Literal charts, metrics, social media ROI, alleged pull with international viewers. She didn't ask for more. She supposedly demanded it as a business transaction. That's not reality TV star behavior. That's executive energy. And to networks that spend years trying to maintain balance between sympathy and ownership, that's terrifying. Because now you're not just managing a castmate, you're managing the CEO of her own narrative. That's when the pushback came. Suddenly, Jasmine's storyline was cut shorter. Promo materials didn't spotlight her as heavily. She was noticeably absent from early press rounds. TLC didn't announce it publicly. But Jasmine, she didn't miss a beat. Posts about betrayal got darker. Captions included dates of filming, more emojis, more frustration. It wasn't silence. It was war, coded in stories, fueled by comments, and driven by an audience that didn't even realize they were becoming part of her next move. And some industry insiders, they saw it coming. Because the moment a cast member realizes fans equal leverage and leverage means negotiation power, the network starts sweating. Because fan favorites make great TV, until they become threats to the machine. At Jasmine's peak, sources confirm contract negotiations turned brutal, emotional. Some say she refused to show up unless she got equal pay to names she personally outperformed on engagement. Others say she threatened to skip filming altogether, then show up anyway and film herself from her phone. And honestly, that might have worked. She would have dropped the footage online, let fans do their thing, and somehow stayed more relevant than the polished stuff TLC put on cable. Every move Jasmine made was risky, but every risk kept her trending, until the very act of controlling her became uncontrollable. And when that final meeting happened, the one execs won't talk about, it didn't just result in a contract cutoff. It sparked a quiet shutdown of every possible spin-off or future project involving her. They couldn't risk one cast member rewriting the platform. But what they didn't count on, even off the show, she still had the audience. And one silence-breaking post might blow everything wide open. The camera made them look mismatched. But off camera, it was something deeper, something darker, something that made even the crew start whispering things like, should they even be shooting this today? From the outside, Jasmine and Gino were volatile, sure, but still dramatic gold. Their fights were legendary. Every fight had a meme. Every apology got clipped, gifted, reposted. But what nobody saw, what wasn't edited in, were the silences. The hours between scenes where Gino reportedly stayed in his trailer, barely speaking. The nights the shoot wrapped early because someone had walked off. Again. And it was almost always because of the same thing, an off-screen argument that bled into production. Not over cheating, not over jealousy, over control. Multiple crew members allegedly confirmed the directive. Prep for short days when Jasmine and Gino film. Why? Because the odds of full emotional collapse ran high. Jasmine accused, Gino shut down. Gino deflected, Jasmine escalated. Cameramen said the tension before scenes became physically exhausting. B-roll footage was loaded not for aesthetics, but to plug the gaps when conversations went completely off script or shut down entirely. What fans saw on screen were the flashpoints, the shouted demands, the walkouts, but those weren't the worst parts. The worst parts were the hours between where the set stood frozen, waiting, hoping someone would come back, hoping someone wouldn't. Behind the lens, there's a saying, the more perfect the chaos reads on screen, the harder it was to shoot. And with Jasmine and Gino, the chaos was too clean, too sharp, too frequent. That's the first red flag. One assistant producer reportedly broke down in a van replaying what had just happened in a scene they'd shot. Not because the footage was unusable, but because it was too usable. Brutal, real, raw in a way that didn't feel ethical anymore. One moment, the cast is arguing over finances. The next, Gino's voice drops, not angry but tired, not confused but done. He didn't yell, he didn't storm off. He collapsed into himself, and that silence freaked everyone out. That was when production allegedly decided to rotate staff, mix up the team, fresh energy. Spare the regulars who'd sat too close to emotional toxicity for too long. A whisper swelled, this isn't healthy anymore. Not for the cast, not for the crew, and for the network this wasn't brand new. Things get tense on these sets. Emotions run hot, that's the formula. But crew members started requesting assignment reassignments. Volunteers dropped out of reunion tapings. New hires were warned to be mindful around the couple. At one point, according to someone inside logistics, Jasmine and Gino were scheduled in different hotels. Not for aesthetics, for safety, verbal safety, emotional space. So they wouldn't blow before the scenes even started rolling. And even that didn't stop it. The biggest problem with reality TV is that pain looks a lot like content until it turns into liability. Gino was allegedly briefed by producers on how to respond. Keep your cool, don't escalate. And for the most part, he didn't. But keeping your cool isn't the same as being okay. And off camera, he wasn't okay. According to someone close to post-production, there were whole filming blocks where Jasmine's outbursts didn't even make the episode. Not because they weren't dramatic enough, but because Gino's reaction wasn't safe enough to show. Not dangerous, just devastating. Blank eyes, shivers, flat affect. He wasn't playing anymore. He wasn't performing. At some point, Gino stopped being a cast member and started being a caution sign. The editing team had a name for it, Red Season, because red means cut. Red means hot, unstable, unusable, not because of quality, but because of risk. And when editors start flagging scenes for psychological tone, not audio levels, you know something's off. Jasmine allegedly didn't react well to this. Scenes she thought would make the episode didn't air. Posts went up. Funny how the truth never makes it past the edit. If only the audience knew what really happened. But what she didn't know, or maybe didn't care, was that people inside the project were burning out. And not with sarcasm, with real dread. Assistant sound engineers were having meetings about PTSD triggers. Emotional safety briefings were added last minute. And at night, when cameras were powered down and everyone filtered back to hotel rooms, nobody wanted to talk about the show. They wanted to forget it. Even other cast members started shifting their energy. Scenes where Jasmine exploded. People stood further away. You can go back and look. The reactions change. There's less surprise and more self-protection. Longer pauses before stepping in. Jasmine wasn't scary, she was draining. And somewhere in those weeks, the cast stopped interacting after hours. It wasn't personal. It was practical, burnout protection. Conversations between scenes turned tactical. How much are you saying? Who's mic'd right now? Is she on set? That wasn't trust. That was coordination to avoid flare-ups. Producers allegedly issued new scheduling blocks, shorter scene duration, time caps on group interactions, and behind closed doors, legal was ramping up coverage, re-reviewing contracts, prepping review memos in case someone walked, because they could feel it coming. Someone would walk. And then came the crew internal thread, not a warning, but a request. One line stood out, "We need backups, we need support." That's what broke open the quiet. The crew was asking for backup, not because they were outnumbered, but because they were worn out, emotionally rinsed. They weren't built to manage spirals. Their job was to stage story, not process trauma. By then, crew members weren't bonding over rap drinks or set gossip. They were checking in on each other's stress fatigue. Some had panic attacks, others stopped sleeping right. And Gino, increasingly withdrawn, not cold, not aggressive, but unreachable. And Jasmine, she kept the energy going, publicly, loudly. She'd post a funny reaction about something triggering, a meme that made a co-star look weak, a tick-tock sound overlaid on an old confrontation. These weren't coincidences. These were shields, narrative shields. If she controlled the optics, she believed she controlled the story. But off-camera, the people tasked with delivering that story were drowning in second-hand fallout, emotional whiplash, script burnout. One crew member allegedly asked to stay on night location shoots despite the noise, because shooting B-roll of streetlights was more peaceful than working the next day with that cast again. And when reunion time hit, nobody was smiling behind the scenes. It wasn't just Jasmine and Gino's vibe. It was the entire floor, weird energy, cold greetings, eyes everywhere. The usual chaos was muted, not fixed, numbed. You could tell they were waiting for the next fight, expecting it. And that's when Gino reportedly had his quietest breakdown. Not the loud one, not the dramatic one. The one where he sat in a corner, headphones in, no interaction, refusing makeup, refusing prep. Silent, distant, gone behind the eyes. Logbooks later said nothing happened that violated shoot conduct, but multiple team members clocked it. Gino wasn't filming anymore. He was surviving. That's when the language shifted. From "we need to get through this shoot" to "we need to end this phase." And when internal postmortems started appearing with words like damage, extraction, crisis fatigue, the future was already decided. The franchise wasn't just editing Jasmine out. They were closing the emotional floodgates before more people internally got swept under. Because once the crew starts saying it's not worth the paycheck, the show's no longer entertainment. It's a liability pipeline with cameras, and the only thing left to film is goodbye. But before Jasmine's contract fully collapsed, she made one final move. One last clash that turned her silent co-stars into accidental survivors and made the network lock every door she ever walked through. Money changes everything. And on reality TV, it doesn't change it slowly. In the beginning, Jasmine showed up for love, or so it looked. She cried, made us laugh, shocked the entire fanbase with her honesty and chaos. And when the paychecks were small, she stayed loud. But as anyone who's watched this franchise long enough knows, popularity breeds leverage. And leverage starts to look like power. The moment Jasmine realized how much she was moving the needle, on ratings, on search, on merch, something shifted. Sources inside production say the turning point wasn't emotional. It was financial. First came the asks, more pay per episode, then faster payouts, then retroactive bumps for time already worked. She wasn't asking for network star money. She was asking for Jasmine money, the kind she believed matched her fan pull. To her, it wasn't ego. It was matched energy. She believed she carried the scenes, that producers built entire plotlines around her reactions, her volatility, her make-or-break scenes. And honestly, that wasn't wrong. Anyone watching could feel the difference when she was off-screen. The episodes slowed. The edges dulled. Ratings reflected that. But on the other side of the camera, things weren't computing the same way. The larger her self-worth grew, the smaller her perceived cooperation became. There were whispers in the budgeting meetings. Jasmine getting more screen time meant higher costs, not because her rate was massive, but because working around her reportedly caused delays. Days stretched by hours. Footage needed multiple versions. Crew rotated faster because of burnout. Every second of meltdown from Jasmine doubled in post-production. That's where the money war started simmering. Then came the brand deals. It started small, an Instagram post with a beauty kit, a fitness shake she never tagged officially. Early in the game, TLC waved it off, but insider sources say she never reported those deals, and under her contract. That was a problem, because the NDAs run deep, and cast members don't get free rein to monetize the fame they gained through network shows without approval. But Jasmine didn't stop. By mid-season, she was allegedly pocketing money directly from sponsors, while keeping the details vague enough to dodge stakes. The language was in partnership, gifted, never paid promotion. But anyone in the industry could read between the lines. Those weren't gifts. They were unchecked revenue streams. One source close to contract enforcement called it the gray zone hustle, not public enough to call fraud, but consistent enough to violate standard agreements. It wasn't accidental. Jasmine knew what she was doing. Fans would ask, "Where is this from?" And she'd say, "DM me." That skips the paper trail. That cuts TLC out of the revenue. And quietly she made enemies behind the scenes. The network didn't care that she was making money. They cared that she was making it off their image. And the more they pushed back, the more she escalated her ask. By the end of her arc, Jasmine was reportedly negotiating appearance bonuses, amounts some insiders argued were higher than what some veteran cast members earned over full seasons. She wanted better placement in marketing, extra money for stories that showed her breakdowns, clauses about hairstyling budget, makeup reimbursements, Uber rides, personal glam, separately reasonable requests, together a pattern of leverage. And the producers saw it for what it was. One cast member squeezing the system that made her. That's when the meetings stopped being about stories and started being about risk. Jasmine allegedly made comments about going to the press if TLC didn't meet her numbers. Fans thought it was about her emotional storyline. But the real argument, sources say, was always about the money. Contracts were re-reviewed. Legal double-checked tax disclosures. Screenshot trails popped up, Jasmine working with vendors she never told the network about, coaching fans on where to click to support direct. Suddenly, Jasmine wasn't just the star. She was the brand, separate from TLC, competing with TLC, and still using their audience to sell herself. Insiders say it spun out so fast, higher-ups went silent. Requests stopped being asked nicely. They were read like ultimatums. If she wants her bonus, we require a promo post now. No promo, no payout. No payout, no compliance. No compliance, pull the storyline. Into that back and forth came the heart of the downfall. At some point, Jasmine stopped caring how she was perceived by production. She stopped hiding frustration. She started getting louder on live streams. And with every passive jab her fans defended, her sense of invincibility grew a little more. She believed people were on her side. And when you believe the masses adore you, you feel like the rules are optional. There's a term in entertainment circles for talents who push their weight. Worth the drag. Meaning, they're a headache, yes, but the value they bring compensates for the mess. That was Jasmine. She was worth the drag until she wasn't. Because as the financial pressure increased, so did the instability. A crew member recalled a filming day stalled for 4 hours because Jasmine was arguing backstage about the contract on her phone. Another cast member allegedly walked from a group scene after she shouted about being paid less than everyone else in the room. Was that true? No one knows for sure, but perception became the weapon. Jasmine believed she earned more. Others didn't. That belief ate trust like acid from the inside. At one point, she demanded to see the output metrics, real breakdowns, how much each cast member was earning, what TLC earned on viral clips, even allegedly asking for a percentage of advertising on tweets using her likeness. That's not overconfidence. That's a cast member no longer playing talent. That's someone behaving like a stakeholder. And from a distance, it all reads like ambition. A woman working the system, recognizing her value, demanding respect. But inside, it felt like collapse in slow motion. Because no system can survive when one cog starts shifting the entire machinery in a direction no one planned for. TLC responded the only way networks know how, quietly. No confrontation, no big announcement. The budget line tightened. The calls stopped being answered the same day. Reunion confirmations delayed. Promo requests were rerouted. Jasmine wasn't fired. She was frozen. Slowly, deliberately. By the time fans started asking where she went, the transition was complete. The funny thing, she could have stayed longer. She could have negotiated bigger numbers the usual way, through agents, reps on merit. But power doesn't feel satisfying when it's earned slow. Jasmine wanted it now, because she believed she held it already. Her rise started with loud confidence. It ended with silent overreach. And the worst part, she was incredible at what she did. She wasn't replaceable. Emotionally, narratively, promotionally, she brought the pressure that made scenes pop. But star power doesn't survive when it eats its own engine. And that engine had been running hot for way too long. She didn't just break the rules. She kept asking why they applied to her in the first place, and that's the question no production ever wants to answer. Nobody ever thought it would get to this point. Not the crew, not the network, not even Jasmine herself. She tested limits before screaming matches, contract threats, cryptic social media bombs that sent PR teams scrambling. But every time she walked right up to the line and didn't quite cross it until she did. It didn't happen while filming. It happened before they could even roll. The cast had flown in. Rehearsals were locked. Makeup chairs were full. The reunion shoot was beginning, and Jasmine wasn't in the building. Her crew, there. Her wardrobe, delivered. But Jasmine was still in her hotel room, the door bolted shut, phone off. At least that's what they assumed, because she wasn't answering anyone. Producers delayed call time. Nothing new. She'd shown up late before. But then word came down. She wasn't just running late. She wasn't coming out. Not until a senior producer met her in person with detailed earnings breakdowns of what every other cast member was making. Not until she had proof that she wasn't being underpaid for carrying the franchise. That's not a delay. That's a hostage demand. Now cast tantrums aren't rare. People walk out, cry, threaten to quit all the time. It's part of the drama machine. It blurs into entertainment. But this was different. It wasn't about one argument. It wasn't personal. It was strategic, calculated. She believed she had the power to bring the schedule down and dared the network to blink first. And behind the scenes, producers did blink. Privately, meetings were paused. Phone calls were made. Executives checked availability for a crisis response team. A decision had to be made: delay production or call her bluff. They chose neither. They made a third call: note everything. Record timestamps. Document delays, screenshot every correspondence. Because this time they weren't bending. This time they were building a case. The reunion taping moved forward without her. Quietly, carefully. And everyone felt it. The shift so many insiders had whispered about was finally happening. By the time Jasmine finally came down, she was ready, fully dressed. Calm, as if nothing had happened. But it was too late. Word had spread. The cast was cold. You could see it in the footage, arms crossed, eyes flat, no one looking her in the face unless they had to. Even Gino. She walked in needing control. She walked out isolated. During filming, her talking points turned sharp, blamed narrative editing, alluded to crew bias, claimed manipulation on set. At one point, she reportedly halted a segment mid-take to accuse producers of trying to paint her crazy. There was no shouting this time. No tears. It was steady, performed, clear. And that's what scared production the most, not chaos, but composure engineered to threaten without ever raising a voice. One producer told a senior member afterward, she stopped filming the show and started performing for the lawsuit she hasn't filed yet. That was the final straw. Not the tension, not the delays, not even the threats. It was the cold efficiency of the manipulation, because shows can handle drama and misbehavior. What they can't handle is someone smart enough to weaponize the system, someone who knows your legal playbook better than you do. Right after shooting wrapped, everyone left with the same understanding. Jasmine might never film again, not because she quit, because the network wouldn't let her. Behind closed doors, executive meetings shifted tone. Internal documents were handed off to legal. Footage flagged. HR walked through staff experiences. The tone wasn't panic. It wasn't revenge. It was cleanup. The most shocking part, how many people had been waiting for this? Producers smiling more. Assistant editors relieved. Wardrobe stress-free. PR finally silent. Jasmine didn't just dominate episodes. She dominated operations. And once she was unplugged, the system exhaled. For weeks afterward, she still posted, hinting at betrayal, promising truths, talking about exposure. Fans flooded the comments, defended her, echoed her pain. But internally, nobody flinched. This wasn't speculative anymore. It was structural. The network had made its call. She was done. Done doesn't mean erased. Done means removed from future planning, sidelined in brand strategy, uninvited from ongoing content. It's the slowest, coldest kind of ending. And maybe the hardest part of watching her go was knowing how high she'd climbed. She entered the show as a wild card. She left it a nucleus, more popular than some whole cast pairings. And she blew through that power like fuel during a crash. Not because she stopped being good for TV, but because she became bad for everything else. For set safety, for staff wellness, for consistency, reliability, emotional regulation. One person inside the legal review committee allegedly said, "We don't fire stars, they fire themselves. We just make the paperwork look clean." This wasn't exile. This was a quiet war that ended with silence. But silence isn't ever truly silent with Jasmine. She left trails. Even now, her cryptic captions have people double-tapping with questions. Her fan base lives on. They haven't let her go, even if the network has. And some say she planned it this way, engineered her own exit with just enough scandal to pivot elsewhere. Maybe she doesn't want back in. Maybe she wants her own platform. And maybe, just maybe, she threw the whole system into the fire to prove she didn't need it. But in the shadows of that decision, broken relationships, burned-out coworkers, a franchise scrambling to reset expectations and rebuild trust. Because for every cast member who was shocked by her exit, there was another one silently relieved. She wasn't the villain. She wasn't the victim. She was the storm. The network had loved her for it, until they paid the price. And as the dust settled, nobody was cheering. Nobody got a victory. Jasmine saw herself as the sun. Bright, central, untouchable, but stars burn out. And when they go, they don't crash quietly. They implode. Being off the show didn't mean Jasmine disappeared. If anything, the quiet made her louder. With cameras gone and contracts cut, she did what she knew best: reclaim attention, ignite speculation, and pull the spotlight back without saying a single word too directly. The first post came 3 days after the reunion wrapped. A mirror selfie. No caption, just eyes swollen from what looked like tears and a single red heart emoji. For fans who were paying attention, it wasn't aesthetic. It was bait. They flooded the comments. "What did they do to you? You don't owe them anything. Expose it." She didn't reply. She didn't need to. Then came stories with thinly veiled shots. Snippets of songs about betrayal, captions like "Truth always wins." They think they can erase me, and healing begins when silence ends. She never named names, never tagged the network. But to every follower who'd ridden her drama high, they already knew what those posts meant. People assumed it was heartbreak. A fight with Gino, maybe something personal, but insiders say it was calculated. Jasmine knew what would get attention, and the best weapon she'd ever had was mystery framed as survival. Suddenly, small YouTubers began getting apparent insider tips, messages from friends of friends, DMs from first-hand sources. Always just vague enough to protect her identity, but piercing enough to sound like the real thing. Stories about producers coercing her into certain behaviors, about castmates allegedly feeding lies to editors, about checks going missing, promises broken, payments delayed. Fans ran wild. Reddit threads exploded. Some accused TLC of silencing a woman who was too real for the format. Others accused Jasmine of carefully weaponizing her fanbase to fight battles she didn't want to name herself. No matter where you stood, the truth was clear. Jasmine was gone from the show, but she still controlled the narrative. The cryptic era didn't fade. It evolved. Every time a new episode of 90 Day dropped and her name trended in the comments, she'd post a caption something like, "They're still talking about me." Imagine that. Her fanbase called her a queen. Her critics called it deflection. Then, in what some believe was the most deliberate post-firing strike, Jasmine posted a screenshot of her phone, blurred names placed above a barely visible message preview that read, "Just remember what they did before you speak on it." The post was gone in minutes, deleted before any accountability could be demanded. But the message had landed. Instinctively, fans assumed the message was from a producer. It probably wasn't. But Jasmine didn't correct the guesses. Why would she? Every theory kept her name moving. And without needing the network, she was still delivering drama on her schedule. Legal insiders started watching closely. Not because she was violating explicit NDAs, she never leaked scenes or contracts directly, but because she was poking holes in timelines, letting fans connect dots, and chipping at the credibility of anyone who had the power to challenge her. And that's where fan division started becoming a problem, not just for TLC, but for the cast still tied to her. People started dragging Gino, then producers, then women she never followed. Anyone who stayed silent during her peak chaos became a suspect online once she was removed. Fans convinced themselves a conspiracy lived behind her collapse. And Jasmine, she didn't clarify a thing. Power isn't always about what you say. Sometimes it's about what you let others believe. She knew how to stir sympathy. One day, she'd be savage, mocking a filtered photo of another cast member with a single laughing emoji. The next, she'd be vulnerable, posting raw photos of herself sleeping in makeup, crying, hair undone, with captions like exhausted but still here. Followers lapped it up. Some treated her like a martyr. Others saw the tactics and backed away. That's when things turned strategic again. Suddenly, Jasmine was hinting at a tell-all. Not hers. A fan asked, "Are you ever going to tell your side?" And she replied with a wink emoji and the words, "It's already written." No one knew what she meant. YouTube, a podcast, a blog, a lawsuit, and maybe that ambiguity was on purpose. It kept attention locked. She teased audio receipts. "When I speak, I'll bring proof." Then silence, an entire week of no posts. What came next shocked everyone. A single link on a new account, unverified but promo style, almost like a trailer. "You've heard their edits, now hear my truth." No video, just a teaser. It was pulled offline within hours. Some fans claimed she was threatened legally. Others said it was always just bluff to pressure TLC back into negotiations. But by then, a reversal had started. People began questioning her motives. The wave of support hit its peak and slowly dipped. The why wasn't clear. Some said it was fatigue. Others said her old tactics were now obvious. And yet the silence still lingered at TLC. No rebuttals, no posts, no public defense. Because they knew better than to engage. She wanted a war. They gave her an archive. While Jasmine fought publicly, the network simply closed the file. And that alone, to some, was proof she had hit a nerve. But here's the twist most didn't expect. The quiet from TLC wasn't weakness. It was insurance. Sources claim they were preparing for escalation and had already coordinated with legal to protect narrative exposure. They didn't remove Jasmine because they feared her power. They removed her because they were tired of pretending the show was still theirs. You see, Jasmine didn't plan a comeback. She is the comeback. Every post, every like, every deleted story, it's all the blueprint she used to launch something bigger. The show was a launchpad. Her next move, control. Will she drop everything in a viral video? Maybe. Will it land? Probably. But this isn't about reality TV anymore. Jasmine outgrew the platform she built her name on. And like all breakout personalities who burn systems down, her legacy isn't about where she started, it's about how loudly her silence makes everyone keep watching. Because what happens if Jasmine wasn't fired out of madness or breakdown, but by design? What if the very storm she created was never for the franchise? It was the start of her own. Jasmine wasn't built in a vacuum. She was built in a format that rewards escalation, trains emotional exposure, and filters authenticity through the lens of what clips best. From the very first episode, she played a role that producers encouraged, fiery, explosive, unpredictable, and they kept rolling because the numbers kept climbing. It's easy to blame the cast when things spiral, but sometimes the format does the spiraling first. Reality TV doesn't just document behavior, it shapes it. When being dramatic equates to more airtime, louder confessionals, and bigger checks, the line between who you are and who you perform becomes slippery. And when you're already emotionally raw, culturally displaced, or financially dependent on the show, that slip isn't gentle. It's gravitational. Jasmine didn't start out this extreme. If you look at her earliest episodes, there were shades of vulnerability that felt unedited. You saw the uncertainty, the fear of loss, the aching desire to feel control in a relationship where control wasn't guaranteed. She was volatile, yes, but she was also trying to be seen. Somewhere along the way, the audience gave her what she wanted, and the system gave her what she needed: attention. But attention isn't sustainable fuel. Every season has pressure. Producers build narratives. Fan hate and love arrive in equal measure. Performances become habit. And if you're someone who thrives off validation, that kind of pressure turns addictive. Jasmine didn't just gain influence, she needed it. She saw herself rising in real time, as a trending hashtag, as a reaction post, as the reason the show never lost its edge. no matter how routine the other relationships became. She kept things alive, until it killed her place in the very machine she was fueling. So the question isn't, how did Jasmine go too far? The better question might be, how far was she expected to go before they pulled her back? Because the format of reality TV doesn't reward balance. It rewards flair, tears, conflict, lines being crossed just far enough to look like plot without crashing the set. And Jasmine became the perfect storm. The one person who figured out how much control she had before those controlling her could adapt. TLC has never denied that reality TV is part creative and part chaos. But what happens when a cast member becomes stronger than the script? When they game the formula, flip the power, and refuse to be manipulated without leverage in return. That's where things get dangerous. Jasmine was a product of exactly what the format invited: extreme emotional reaction, high-stakes candor, unpredictable behavior. The only difference was she monetized it better and manipulated it faster than the people who were shaping her character arc behind the scenes. So when fans talk about Jasmine being fired, the word itself isn't even the story. She wasn't written out because she was toxic. She was removed because she stopped performing for them and started performing with purpose. Audiences may call that fake, but production called it unmanageable. Not messy, uncontrollable. And in a show like 90 Day Fiancé, nothing scares the machine more than a personality who writes their own ending. Because when one person can dictate their image independently, through social media, fan threats, leaks, unofficial interviews, the show no longer owns the arc. The platform isn't theirs anymore. And that's not a character liability. That's a business liability. Jasmine's power wasn't her storylines. It wasn't even her meltdowns. It was her understanding of how the game was played. She reached a point where she knew she had value that extended beyond final edits. That's what broke the model. That's why her firing wasn't explosive or public. It was surgical, quiet, risk-managed, legal first. But even now, she's still trending. Because the off-camera Jasmine has become the version fans watch for now. She wasn't erased. She just migrated. And that's the evolution of reality TV we rarely name out loud. The difference between being cast and being in control. Between staying employed and owning the screen. Jasmine went further than anyone else was willing to. And she paid the price. But she also proved something uncomfortable, that the line between being exploited and being empowered is so razor thin, even the people cashing in can't always tell when it's been crossed. Especially when it stops looking like drama and starts sounding like strategy. Reality TV doesn't create stars. It exposes people who have always seen fame differently. Some want a platform, others want control. And some, like Jasmine, realize a platform is control if you can use it before it uses you. She did, too well, which is why she's now out of the frame, not fallen, just waiting. And as the next cast members learn how to be louder, bolder, more watchable, the smarter producers will start asking tougher questions. Not about what they say on screen, but how long the chaos can last before the audience loses interest or the talent figures out the playbook. What Jasmine left behind is a warning. Larger-than-life characters don't just boost ratings. Eventually, they build their own worlds. And if production doesn't stay 5 steps ahead, those worlds can swallow the brand whole. But don't get too comfortable. Jasmine's not the only one who's blurred the lines. There's another cast member pulling similar stunts in plain sight, and they've already started building their own audience. In our next episode, we break down the rise of a new drama magnet who might just take Jasmine's crown, but could also be writing their own exit route before season's end.